Looks like we're live, David.
We are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to WorksFest session number 17,000, I think. But no, we are here today to present the session on getting started with Salesforce's AI capabilities for public sector. I'll just give it one more minute just to make sure I think everyone's joining. Yeah, I think we're good to go. So I'll just begin before we do introductions. So firstly, CloudWorks acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of the nation, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Thank you. Okay, hello and welcome everyone again to our session today. My name is David Bowker. I'm the client lead for public sector within CloudWorks. And I'll pass to you, G.
Hey, g'day, folks. My name's Graham, nickname's G. I'm a partner here at CloudWorks, working in the data and AI space, and previously I was one of the founders of a company called Lightfold that CloudWorks acquired very recently. Very happy to be part of the CloudWorks family.
Awesome, thanks, G. So really brief intro on who CloudWorks and Lightfold are. So we're a next generation provider of Salesforce data and AI services right across the full breadth of the Salesforce platform. We have a team of nearly 200 working across a real range of Salesforce projects with some of Australia's most well-known public sector and commercial organizations. Right, so what is WorksFest and why are you all here today, basically? So this week, we've basically done a huge, giant Salesforce Innovation Festival. Highly ambitious, but it's going really well. We've done sessions from Monday through to today and tomorrow as well. Some of the sessions are industry specific and some are agnostic, but there's a whole range that are actually relevant, not just for public sector, but also other industries as well. On Monday, and this is just a quick summary, and we can send recordings over to everybody who was on the call today. But on Monday, we did our basically our 2 to 3 year vision on what the Salesforce platform will be with data and AI. Tuesday, we did a really interesting session around Tableau. A lot of government organizations using Tableau as a on-prem, I guess, and we did a session around the strategy to migrate to Tableau Cloud and to start using Tableau Pulse. And then today, which is a really big day for us, we did a session early today, which was around a solution we built for a very large retailer around leveraging Salesforce for employee engagement. So really, really interesting, and we'll send that out to all of you guys to check out. Today, we're doing this session right now, and then later on today, we have a session led by the ACS CIO around their transformation program. So yeah, check it out, really interesting stuff. And then tomorrow, we've got our keynote, which is around our overall point of view around the data foundation for AI, as well as how to make best use of AI for the Salesforce platform as well. So lots of interesting stuff. Now, so we're here today to talk about AI in the public sector. As probably most of you know, citizen satisfaction for online government services is improving, and obviously government has invested a lot of money in online government services. COVID was a big factor in that, but it has been going in all states in Australia and also the federal side for a number of years. But a direct correlation exists between a citizen's experience and also the level of trust and confidence they actually have within their government and within the services that government provide. So what contributes to a really good citizen experience? Firstly, highly personalized and also proactive. You know, how can government stay one step ahead of that citizen and help them, you know, as they engage with various services? Two, a seamless, unified experience. Bit of a buzzword, but there's so many different government use cases where a person has to deal with multiple different government departments or agencies at the same time, and it's challenging. So the ability to support that person in a more seamless way. So they don't care obviously what agency they're dealing with. They care about how government can help them. So how can government do better at that? Operational excellence, and that's both in terms of speed to serve, but also I guess process improvement, and that's both obviously for the citizen and for government internally as well. And then of course accessibility and security are a key to a citizen's trust of their government. So Salesforce is used for a whole range of really, really critical government services across Australia. And it's actually really cool if you think back to how much Salesforce does do in that government space, both on the federal and all of the states use Salesforce in some way for critical services and departments. What we're doing today really is talking about our view and our point of view, which we're defining as Salesforce 3.0, on how AI really can help accelerate a lot of this, I guess this customer experience improvements. So we're going to talk through firstly what that looks like, as in what the AI landscape is for Salesforce. And then we're going to go into, well, how to get started. And that's really the key question, how to actually start using this. And I'll just finish on one point. AI, huge topic at the moment, but there's a stat from a BCG report they did recently with Salesforce, and it was that 75% of people who were part of this survey were very open for government to use Gen AI within the services they deliver to that person, which I think is a really, really big thing, and I'm sure that's going to go even higher as AI matures even more. So that's enough for me. Anything more to add there, G?
I think in that same report that you were just talking about there with BCG, it was very interesting because there's a bit of a dichotomy that's happening with our citizens in the country, which is that you said there that stat of 75% would be comfortable seeing generative AI in the service aspect of dealing with government. But another one of the statistics in there was something along the lines of, I think, 84% of respondents expected that their government experience when going through channels would be as good as or better than their experience with private industry. And so you've kind of got an interesting thing happening there where private industry has grabbed a hold of chatbots and generative AI with both hands. And so that experience is only going to be getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so if citizens are expecting that they get that same level of service from government, there's going to eventually need to be similar kinds of technologies being used. But then we've also got that other number of 75% thinking that they would be comfortable with it. So there's interesting things to play with there. The other thing, because it is a great report, that one, the other statistic that I thought was amazing in there was, or rather, sorry, not a statistic, but just a quote from one of the anonymous respondents, which was, it was quoting with regards to a poor experience they'd had with some kind of digital channel. And it was something along the lines of, if they can't get this right, how could I trust them with more complicated technologies? And so it is really getting things done right, starting small, getting it done really well, because then you can build up that trust over time, which means you're then securing more data, building more trust, better experience. Anyway, it's a great report. So people should check that out. What's it, the BCG Trust Imperative or something?
Yeah, really good stuff.
Awesome. Well, yeah, look, let's jump in. I won't talk any more about that, but we've got this first big slide hitting us between the eyes there. Salesforce 3.0, it's a big claim. Folks, by the way, I've got my slides on this screen, so if I'm looking over here, that's what I'm looking for. Effectively, we really do think that Salesforce 3.0 isn't too much hype. We actually believe that it is warranted based on where we're going now. There's some really big changes that are fundamental to how Salesforce is operating, and some fundamental technologies that Salesforce has been investing in for the last 2 years, which means that the generative AI and AI capabilities across the board are incredibly strong within Salesforce. But the the creme de la creme, the little cherry on top that's been happening over the last 6 months or so is really the implementation of more of what Data Cloud is doing as well, that modern data platform idea. So there's a lot of technologies here. What I'd love to do is just pick out a couple of these that are incredibly important for our initial topics, and then we'll move through them as we go. So if I show you this diagram here, this effectively is what Salesforce are calling Einstein 1. Einstein 1 is it's everything that we've in the past had under that Einstein brand, everything to do with data, AI, analytics, predictive modeling, generative AI. It's all of those things, but it's now getting stronger and more intertwined all across the Salesforce platform. So if we have a look at this diagram and we move through, we start right down at the bottom with data. Previously, data has been flowing into Salesforce very well. There's a whole bunch of ways you could do it, but largely you're going to be integrating it. You're going to be having something like a MuleSoft or maybe an API connection, sending data straight through to an object inside of Salesforce. And that works fine for a whole bunch of different use cases. What we've got access to now, though, in this data cloud layer is effectively a place where you've got essentially a data warehouse, but attached to your Salesforce environment. And crucially, within the Salesforce security bubble. It's on Hyperforce, effectively, that layer that is transmitting data all through how Salesforce operates. A couple of really key things here that are going to be important later, and we'll come to an exploration of them more, but structured and unstructured data down there in the data cloud section. Critically there, Salesforce has handled structured data incredibly well for ages. Those are your records, your opportunity records, or inside government, your citizen records, your contact records, case records. Salesforce handles that incredibly well. What Salesforce now has the option to handle via Data Cloud is unstructured data. You could think of unstructured data as a whole bunch of things like video, PDFs, documents that are scanned, for example. Anything like that you could think of as unstructured data. The other thing that's critical down in that bottom area is the vector database. I won't go too deep into it because it gets a bit techy, but effectively, vector databases are what make things like GPTs and large language models for generative AI. A vector database is what turns that into something that is contextual for you and your organization, or contextual for your particular policies or your particular methods of dealing with customers. So all incredibly important to then seeing how AI rolls out everywhere. In the AI layer, incredibly important there is effectively the model agility. That's critical because you want to be using different kinds of AI models inside your Salesforce environment for different use cases. So being able to just naturally link into the type of model you need, really important. The major features there inside of the Einstein trust layer, this is where I guess most of all is critical for building up that citizen trust, that trust in government. If you're doing those things correctly, if you're having the secure data retrieval and you're governing that correctly, the dynamic grounding, that's again basing the information that your chatbots, your large language models are using on information that you have secured and structured. And then the data masking, so you're making sure that people can only ever see the level of data that they need to see. That's where you're getting that right. That's where you're getting that right. That's what's then going to flow into those great customer experiences, which will then have that circular effect of building up people's trust in how you're using things. Once you've moved through that, we've got the Einstein Studio layer there. Here is the critical components for making use of generative AI. The two big things there that are critical are RAG, and we'll come back to what that is in a minute, and prompt builder. So everything that generative AIs are doing is all about retrieval augmented generation. That's what RAG stands for. and prompts. Everything is prompts. Whenever you see somebody in one of those demos of generative AI or chat GPT or what have you, and they're typing in the various questions, that is what's known as a prompt. And having really good quality prompt tooling for your people to use with perhaps automated suggestions of the kinds of prompts that are appropriate for various levels of customer interactions or citizen interactions. And then RAG, that retrieval augmented generation, that's what enables you to then have, we want our responses to be in the context of this particular policy that our department has put forward. That's how you build those things together. You tell the prompt builder to go and retrieve the appropriate information from those policies and then augment the generative AI's response with that. There's a whole bunch more about that we can go into later, but I don't want to take things at too high a level and kind of leave out some of the details, because this is a detail-oriented part of what we do as I guess as the people responsible for the data in our organizations. Right at the top, then, it's all of the things that you're pretty much familiar with Salesforce for. You can have all of those features, all of that security, all of that amazing information flowing through to sales, service, marketing, commerce, analytics. In government, I guess you'd be looking at things like maybe even health cloud or perhaps education cloud or things like that. You would want the information flowing through to the places where you can make use of it. The main example that we'll use later to give context is around case generation, so that interaction with somebody, but there's a whole bunch of ways this information could be used. You could honestly talk about this for probably the rest of the session. I could stay on this one slide just talking through these things, but that wouldn't be terribly interesting. So let's jump through. We're going to hit on just a couple of those really key bits of technology again. Einstein 1 Studio. Effectively, Einstein Studio is the inbuilt tool within Data Cloud that lets you build out predictive models, that helps you build out the various prompts that are going to be helping your users interact with a generative AI. Just as a side note, a term that we've been starting to use that I think makes a lot of sense is actually conversation, on how you converse with a generative AI. I know that it's not really a conversation, but it's to the point now where it feels like it is. You're having a conversation with a generative AI. And so that's what those prompts are building you towards. And so giving your people, your team members, your customer service agents, giving them the ability to have a meaningful, safe, and appropriately contextualized conversation with a generative AI. That's how you actually make this thing sing and get those amazing results that citizens are more and more going to be expecting. David, I want to take a pause on each of the next couple of slides, just because I have so much of this flowing through my mind all the time. I'd love it if you would perhaps ground me with any particular question that you think might be relevant on these couple of slides. Anything that you think I've missed there or that I should go a little bit deeper into?
No, I think we're good for now, G.
Excellent. You just let me know then.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Will do.
The trust layer. This is obviously critical. Everything inside of Salesforce is governed by the various Salesforce trust layers. And the Einstein trust layer is, of course, where a huge amount of investment has been done and a huge amount of security checking, a huge amount of user testing in order to make sure that anybody's data that's flowing through to be used by a generative AI or to be used in predictive modeling or to be used in any kind of analytics even, that it's being appropriately secured and appropriately monitored. A couple of things that are incredibly critical and that, to be honest, is actually largely a solved problem, but we must be cognizant of it, is hallucinations in our large language models or in our generative AI. Now, you may not be familiar with that term hallucination in this context, but essentially what it really means is a large language model it generates its responses by going into, I don't know, 900 dimensional space and coming up with, what thinks it is the most relevant response. And 99.999% of the time, it's going to be something that's amazing and wonderful and useful. But in the early days, sometimes it would hallucinate. It would come back with a response like, uh, perhaps you're asking it how to code something or what features exist in a particular bit of software, and it would come back and say, oh yes, absolutely, that's got the feature of inbuilt predictive modeling. And no, it didn't. So this is where having that layer of dynamic grounding, where you're feeding it your context, your policies, your information around how your users and your customers or your citizens are interacting with your department, that's what gets rid of any of that chance. Well, there might still be a tiny chance, and this is why we need humans in the loop, but it gets rid of most of the possibilities for hallucination, because you're saying to your GPT, your large language model, go get me an answer, but give me the answer in the context of all of this information. And that context, that dynamic grounding, is what means you're going to get these amazing responses. Importantly, though, toxicity detection. We're also wanting to make sure that the models are not giving us anything that could be potentially damaging or potentially risky. And then, of course, the secure data retrieval. We want to make sure that any data that's being used for this is flowing through neatly. And then that's why, and once it's flowed through all of that, that's when it's finally going to arrive in the hands of your teams, ready for them to make use of it.
Yep.
I'll skip through this one very quickly because I think we've already talked a lot about what Data Cloud is doing, but I'll just focus one more time on some of those really important sections of Data Cloud. We've got the fact that your information can be streaming into it as a data warehouse or as an adjunct to an existing data warehouse. And we've got, actually, there is one very exciting thing that we should talk about in that part of the layer. A lot of the data warehouses now in the cloud, things like Snowflake or Redshift or Databricks, these various cloud data warehouses, a lot of them are working very closely with Salesforce, particularly on the data cloud layer, to create something called zero copy data transfers, or effectively mirrored data. So the data that's in one system is in the other system, without you having to have some kind of replication engine passing the information through. That's incredibly powerful, and that technology is only getting better and better and better. Right now, I believe that Snowflake is GA, and I think Databricks may be GA, and I think Redshift is coming soon for that functionality. Although safe harbor, safe harbor. But yeah, there's a bunch of things happening that are incredible with connecting the Salesforce stack to the entire to the remainder of your company's data estate or your government's your department's data estate.
And maybe a question, G. So a lot of times, obviously, clients of ours ask, why do I need data cloud if I've already got a data warehouse or a data lake?
Yeah.
What's the answer that you give in that situation?
Yeah, and it's a really fair question. And ultimately, the answer is that Data Cloud is not just an environment to host data. It's an environment to host data within your Salesforce bubble that is incredibly performant and is going to have natural and native ways to sync with your various Salesforce objects, customer account, what have you, application case. It's also the place where Einstein Studio is housed. It's also the location where you can have your vector database and your unstructured data, all of those PDF documents that are your department's policies on X, Y, and Z. Your training manuals on this is how we want you to engage with customers. That can all be sitting in there as well. Data Cloud effectively becomes a place that can be a data warehouse, not quite as fully featured as something like a Snowflake or Databricks, but it can be a data warehouse for you, or it can be a fantastic and or a fantastic way to mirror what you've already been developing in a data warehouse and get it just chunked straight into Salesforce with very little fuss. That I think would be the best answer to that kind of question. Yeah.
Right.
Once it's in, the other couple of things that we should point out again is the structured and unstructured data, the dynamic segments and grounded generative AI. That's incredibly important. And we should spend just one moment talking about the harmonize and unify as well. One of the things that the Data Cloud is very, very good at is helping you to stitch together a profile, a single unified view of a citizen or a customer, depending on how you look at it. So for example, if you had several Salesforce environments and perhaps you've got some older systems or some systems that are external to Salesforce, and each one of those environments has a view of citizen, and you want to be able to have all of those stitched together. Inside of Data Cloud, you have a whole bunch of inbuilt features and inbuilt functionality to create a unified citizen profile, a unified customer profile. That profile can then be bounced anywhere. It can be bounced back out to your data warehouse. It can be bounced into Salesforce. It can be bounced wherever you need it. So yeah, very, very powerful to be able to have that all in the one chunk of functionality. Awesome. I'm gonna just zoom straight past this one. This is the one that when we send out the deck, just feast your eyes on this. But really, this is simply showing the amount of investment that Salesforce has made into the AI space and the generative AI space. As you can see, a ton of these features are already GA, and a lot of them are becoming GA theoretically in June. So yeah, it's an exciting space.
I think my view on this one, and maybe the key point, is that most clients we deal with don't realize there's this much out there now. Obviously, AI is an evolving topic. So that's one point. And the other point is Gen AI is the flavor of the month.
The new hotness.
Yeah, yeah. But predictive modeling, predictive AI, that's been around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is actually that's now becoming back to the forefront of actually, we're working with government clients who are now wanting to do that. Maybe they weren't quite as interested a couple of years ago, but now they are. So, certainly we want our clients and agencies and governments to look at both because both have benefits.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, predictive modeling sometimes got us, labeled with that additional label of it's AI, and that made people, a little bit scared of it sometimes in years gone by. When actually predictive modeling, yes, it's a kind of artificial intelligence, I suppose, but really it's a solved technology. We've had the algorithms and the mathematics around predictive modeling for 25, 30 years. And so, yeah, being able to have that kind of come back into the conversation because of this renewed interest in AI and in machine learning in general, it's fantastic because you actually have some amazing synergies that can occur where you can have a predictive model looking at data and finding those interesting correlations between this and that. And then you could be feeding those correlations to a generative AI and say, the predictive model has found these interesting correlations. Can you please analyze that in the context of responding to customer service requests or whatever? And the two go hand in hand. It's really some amazing technology. All right, so we're going to do a bit of an example here. This is case resolution as it traditionally was done. This is essentially all human, right? So you've got your various channels for information to be coming in through web, email, chat, calls. You're then capturing the case, usually by a manual process if it's coming in through, for example, email or chat, and it might be automatically generated if it's coming in via web or call. Sometimes the other way around as well, but there's a human involved usually. At that point, a human is then going to be skimming it or maybe looking at the subject line and trying to think, okay, who is going to be best positioned to answer this? out there in industry, and I believe also inside public sector. David, you can check me on this in a minute, but certainly outside in industry, I've heard situations where there's as a case arrives, there's 12 categories, and then each of those categories might have 50 to 100 subcategories. And it takes a human minutes and minutes and minutes to go through and try and find the one they want. And unless they're very, very experienced in that case category model, it usually gets it, people usually get it wrong and then needs to bounce and bounce and bounce. Is that the same inside of public sector as well?
Yeah, yeah. Simplistically put, yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I imagine so, right? Because especially when you've got a government organization, the number of services it will provide, and if it has a centralized customer service point, I can imagine that ballooning out hugely. Once you've got it assigned, you then head into a case management process. Salesforce knowledge articles could be helping there. At a certain point, your agents are going to be able to decide, can we solve this or do we need to escalate for further information? If it's resolved, it's resolved. If it's escalated, you escalate and then solve. And then lastly, there might be closing the loop, asking the customer at the end, how did we do? Once we've got that, how did we do, plus all of the information around how long it took to answer the case, how many times it got bounced from person to person before it found the right subject matter expert, then we can do our service analytics and understand, right, who, who and where can we improve?
And clearly, this is a simplistic, you'll see in a minute where we're going with this, but this is a simplistic process. Obviously, in government, say in human services, that it's a complex case management solution or process. It's a lot more detailed than this. This is just to show really where we think AI is going in the, unfortunately, a lot of government organizations that we deal with are at that traditional point. Mm. I'll let you take over, but this is basically where government can get to now,
Yeah.
with what's out there now, as a fairly, without a huge amount of challenge. It's probably
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And very well pointed out too, in that it is a complex environment, especially inside government. Within each of these, there could be, I don't know, 3, 4, half a dozen sub actions that are happening before it's moving to the next stage. You might also have a loop of confirmation that's going on. So yeah, absolutely, really good, really well pointed out that it's more complicated than we're showing here. But these are a good way to show, like you say, David, where AI could be helping right now. So we've got this modern gen. So this is what could you do right now? So right now, when we're at that point of capturing things, you've got Einstein case classification. So there's a whole bunch of ways that the Einstein functionality within Service Cloud or within your various cloud environments could help you classify what kind of case it is. You would be able to help it find, it would be able to help you find the kind of case, the priority, perhaps even sentiment it might be able to do. But that, I think, is maybe a next layer feature. Once we're moving into case routing, you've given the AI a whole bunch of rules around, hey, we think that cases that hit this kind of category and this level of priority, they should route here or there. These are AI-assisted routes and AI-assisted rules that could be making that a lot easier. Again, this is functionality that exists right now. Once we get into the next chunk, we're looking at AI-assisted case management. So this is where I want to take a quick pause and actually dive into this a little bit more. So something that I hear about a lot is when cases are, and we are in the service side of things, case management side of things, as an example, but when a conversation perhaps is being passed to another person for their input, that new person in the chain is going to have to read every email, every conversation, every back and forth in order to truly understand what's going on in that interaction. If they can do that very, very quickly, brilliant. But more likely, it's going to take some time. Two ways they might handle that. They might skim it, maybe missing something, or they might spend the time, but that's reducing the amount of cases they could handle. So what you've got there, conversation summaries, is effectively a generative AI looking back through the conversation that you've been having with a particular citizen, and then giving a really solid summary of the important points that have happened up to that point. You could even be using things in your prompt builder. If you remember, prompts are what we feed to a generative AI to get a response. In your prompt builder, you could even be asking it to, hey, specifically, please look for these terms because these are terms that I know if they're coming up in this context, I need to know that straight away. I really want to know that. I want that pulled out. You could be also then saying, have a look at this conversation and summarize it in the context of these various policies and knowledge articles we have. Again, bringing that in and helping bring people up to speed sooner rather than later. Even though we're talking in the case management section, you could have that happening in the case escalation section as well, as you pass it up to your senior manager up the line and they're going, great, I need to get up to speed on this. Boom, summarized, I'm up to speed, I know what to do next.
Exactly. And it's also, for complex case management situations where it's multiple agencies looking after one person, the challenge right now is that obviously a different agency will, who's delivering their service will have the information that's pertinent to them.
Yeah.
They might be integrating data as well, but generally it's the information that they need to know for their service that they're obviously focusing most on. This is a great way of getting everybody across the same information quickly. And obviously, in some situations, speed is a genuine life and death matter.
Yeah.
So it's a really important feature.
Yeah. That's you're so right. And then similarly, the other chunk that's just above that conversation summaries piece, you've got the service replies. This is again where I want us to keep imagining and keep in mind the term AI assisted. So we're not suggesting at this point that information comes in, an AI reads it all, and then before anybody gets a chance to look at it, it spits out a response and sends it to your customer, to your citizen, the person you're running the case with. Instead, when we're talking AI assisted service replies, again, you could feed a prompt to your generative AI inside of Salesforce, all sealed and secure in there, and feed it the prompt that's saying, hey, in the context of helping people find, I don't know, disability services, or helping people find community teams that they could be part of, or something along those lines, please draft a response for me. And it'll have a look at all of your information that you've given it about all the cool community events that are planned for the next 12 months, and then come back with a drafted response. At that point, your users, your team, can go look at it. Yep, I like that. Let me copy that bit, copy that bit. I'll add my own bit. Looks good. Send it. You've still got a human in the loop at that point, making sure that they're checking every stage, but how much faster can they be when they've got that draft that's already maybe 90% of the way there for them already? We'll zoom through a little bit from there now. There's a couple of things that are really powerful, but I want to make sure we don't miss anything towards the end of this session as well. Right down at the end there, though, after we've gone through case escalation and you've got Einstein case wrap up, this is again similar to the conversation summary where it will be giving a manager or a team leader, this is what happened. And very, very quickly, they can come up to speed and just go, great, cool, no worries. Similarly, then AI assisted feedback. In that process where you're asking for feedback from a customer, you again could have a incredibly personalized request, right? So for example, let's say that the person first started at agency A and they got on a call there, and then they were passed to a customer service agent in agency B, and then agency B passed it up the line to a manager, and then that manager managed to get them an excellent response, but they still had to go through those layers. You could send them an incredibly personalized request for feedback drafted by the generative AI and then sent by a human, if you want, that says, hey, we know that you had to speak to several agencies on your pathway to talk to us. We think that we solved your problem really well in the end. Would you mind giving us some feedback if that is the case? That may or may not be the way you'd like it done in your particular environment. But the fact that you could do something like that is just, it's amazing technology. And I think it could be very powerful in that hyper personalization that people are saying they expect from government in the same way they expect it from a private sector.
Hmm.
All right, let's jump through to near gen. So our CTO at CloudWorks, Chris Baldock, originally I was thinking that we were going to call this next gen, but then Chris was saying, no, 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 it's not next gen. It's near gen. It's tomorrow. It's next month. It's just right around the corner. And so, yeah, so this is near gen case resolution. So a couple of things to point out on the left-hand side here. We've still got our web and our email, but we've got autonomous chat now and autonomous calls. So generative AI is getting to the point where it is largely indistinguishable from a human service agent for many basic interactions. You can help them have personality. You can help them have more humor, less humor, serious when it needs to be. Like you can have an amazing interaction with an autonomous chatbot. Similarly, with an autonomous call, that's maybe slightly further away than autonomous chat, but you will have seen those amazing videos of people taking responses from a generative AI and passing it through a text-to-speech. Some of those text-to-speech engines are incredible now. So you could even almost have an autonomous call like that. Even if you didn't have responses, somebody calling and then just leaving what they were interested in via call, that could then be brought in and passed through the system, again, raising a case. You've captured the case autonomously. You've then got autonomous case assessment and routing. Now, again, you would only proceed to this point when you were very, very certain and you were confident in your bots and you had human oversight and all the things you need. We never want to add more risk into our environment, but this is coming, and it's going to get to the point where it is trustworthy. It is something that everybody looks at and just says, yeah, it makes sense to do it. We give better results to our citizens, to our customers, because of these tools. So autonomously, it gets assigned, it gets assessed for whether or not it's a particularly high risk query. And of course, crucially, if it's been assessed with any of the kind of terms that you might be looking for. So in certain agencies, that might be help, it might be mental health, it might be I feel unsafe, anything like that. You can have told your generative AI, look for anything like that, anything even related to that, and immediately route it to a human being.
And
So
I
this is,
just jumping
yeah,
in there, I've worked in this space a long time. I know what agencies will think around us saying these things and go,
what,
well,
yeah,
about this case, what happens in this situation? And we're definitely not saying that there's plenty of examples that we can all think of where it needs a human involved at that point. Of course it does. It's just kind of almost that thought process around, well, yes, the humans involved, but how can we help that? How can we make their job easier and make this process quicker so that this case is assessed as fast as possible and that person is then given the support they need.
yeah.
So, and it's this, within government, and Graham will go on to it, it's this kind of discussion around assisted versus autonomous constantly, but there is our view, there is more that people can do than they probably in government than they probably realize now.
No, you're right. And one way of looking at it that we were talking to a certified technical architect inside Salesforce, and they were talking about and a really interesting way of looking at it, which was, let's say, for example, we absolutely want humans looking at every single one of these things that comes in, whatever kind of case they are. And let's say that we get 100 of them in a day, and our human team were able to get through 50 of them. Those other 50, they're going to get to them as soon as they can, but they just haven't had a chance to look at them. Let's have the autonomous look at those and then pass, or assisted, as you're saying, David, and pass back, hey, maybe take a look at these next 3 as quickly as possible, just because they seem like they might be important. And there's ways that it can all work together to really power up and multiply the service capabilities of those teams that are doing that amazing work, but there's only so many of them.
Mm.
Yeah. Brilliant. So you've then got the two streams there. Effectively, yes, should this be entirely autonomous? Should this be AI assisted? And the level of desire to be entirely autonomous, that really is going to start likely very small. It's going to be things like that. Hey, what community events are happening in my area? That's the sort of thing that might be entirely autonomous very quickly. But perhaps anything to do with those more dangerous things, maybe never, or at least maybe only assisted. All right, so how do we actually get started? We're going to hit you with the hard sell now. No, I'm kidding. We've got some principles that we think are important for getting started with AI, and these are sort of borne out by various reports and various investigations on how to do this. Effectively, you've got the four big points there on the left-hand side I'm pointing at my screen. You can't see them. Measurable success. Effectively, like anything, and especially in public sector, you need to have a defined success criteria going into how you're going to be using generative AI or any kind of AI at all, and then to be able to measure it at the far end. It's critical for being able to justify budget expenditure, to be able to ensure that we are actually making good use of our public's money. One thing that's really critical is that when you are trying to measure the success of generative AI, you maybe need to think a little outside of the box for what that's actually going to look like. For example, in the AI assisted stream, perhaps the AI assisted actually doesn't save us any time. Maybe the average time per case is still the same, but maybe the average quality of response is far higher because our teams have been supported with the right documentation they need. So they've had more time to go and research the exact answer or what have you. So really thinking through how you're going to measure the success of a generative AI deployment, really critical. User-centric. This is, I think, how everybody is now thinking about applications in general. When we talk about generative AI, you could almost think of it as deploying an application inside your environment. It is a fantastically powerful new tool, but it's just a tool. Unless we have something to point that at and people to use it, it's just a hammer without a nail. So user-centric, we want to, again, be able to measure success. And by doing so, we want to and in order to do so, we want to know what people are going to use it for. So we really want to start with an idea that is well-founded in what industry is doing, and then be able to measure the success of it. And that's really where we get to our third point there, which is starting at a manageable size. There is a lot, and you'll see on the next couple of slides, there's a lot involved in doing generative AI really well. And it can feel like, oh gosh, if we're going to have to roll this out to, our entire department, and we have to do all of these steps to roll it out to our entire department, it's going to seem nightmarish. It's going to seem too big to tackle. We suggest starting small and starting with a vertical slice. So finding that user group that could really make use of an AI assistant in generative AI, or could really make use of some AI case routing or what have you. Focus on that, measure the success of that, and then your team and the team of people that are implementing it will build up that expertise. And suddenly it doesn't seem like such a hard problem anymore, because you roll out then the next one and the next one, and you've multiplied your team's expertise. Users are getting used to it. That's the path that we suggest to go on in this kind of space, especially because inside of public sector, you really want to be thinking about that, and of course you are, that relationship with customer, relationship with citizen, and having a really well delivered experience in one space is going to be far more beneficial overall than a couple of kind of good experiences, especially in the eyes of the citizen. Well, certainly that's what we read in reports at any rate. And then lastly, rapid results. Similarly, all of those things flow together into actually getting something into the hands of people quickly. You could fail fast, so prototype out to a POC or POC out to a prototype, and then go, no, doesn't quite work for us. Take the learnings, try something different. Or you might find, actually, we've got something that really, really helps here. And it was enough of a small use case, enough of a well-defined use case, that we're actually confident to put it in the hands of our people in production. And those rapid results are what are going to give you that momentum to keep going. We've got some viewpoints, and we do have an offering. Of course, we do. We're a consultancy. But we have a viewpoint as to the way to kind of do that. And there are a couple of services that we offer. We offer, and we'll come to them in a moment, but we offer an AI readiness assessment. It's really helping you find that vertical slice and ensure that you've got the measurable success, you've got the right users engaged, you've got the ability to prototype quickly and safely. Beyond that, there's also a whole bunch of advisory work that we can do as you're scaling and growing. But even though I say a bunch of advisory work, we're not talking, squillions of dollars. It's something that is manageable because of how focused it is. As you see here, though, this is the flow that most organizations are going to go through. They're going to establish a foundation, and that's essentially where they're looking for that really quick vertical slice and getting the right people engaged in the process, the right stakeholders across it, start educating people. Once you've done that, you might start looking for those assisted AI use cases. Okay, cool. So we've got some really basic functionality around, automatic case assignment or case classification, even if we're not at case assignment yet. Now we want to get some assisted AI into our responses. Okay, cool, great. You might then roll that out a bit more, so maybe some more complicated assisted AI use cases. And then finally, in the places in your organization where it makes sense, autonomous AI. We start looking at those cases where there's virtually no risk to us letting a bot answer it. A well-configured, well-grounded, well-secured bot. This slide here is another one that I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on. I would encourage you to, pause or when we send out the deck later to have a look at this one in depth. This is the flow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the flow of how you would go about implementing any kind of generative AI, whether it is a vertical slice or whether you do decide to go horizontal and see more wide use cases. As we flow through, it all generally will make sense. It's not rocket science, even though it is data science, I suppose, or AI science maybe. But anyway, you want to review your existing data estate. You want to see, do our technologies actually support mobilizing AI? Conduct a health check of our current data governance and sensitive information policies. This is exceptionally important, especially important if you are going to be doing any interdepartmental data where data is needing to perhaps leave Salesforce and have a replication point or something. Very important there. Human-centered design, we then want to go to, okay, we've got some interesting ideas, perhaps from an advisory with somebody like CloudWorks. We've got some interesting ideas of what we could do. Let's talk to some end users and really find out what's going to work for them, conduct an end user-based assessment, map the identified propositions. So at the end of that end user assessment, there'll be a bunch of value propositions. Like we saw on that slide about 5, 6 slides ago, the amount of features that Salesforce is currently supporting in this space is huge, and more are coming all the time. So let's map the value propositions against the impact and potential costs. We're always wanting to find, and you see the next one, we're always wanting to find the highest value, lowest effort, and fastest value realization. The other thing we always want is we want the use case that is being used as much of the time by as many users as much of the time, because that's what's going to get you value out of your per user per month licenses that you're paying with Salesforce. We then want to deploy any new technologies, policies, architectures to support those value propositions, implement them as POC or prototype if we're starting to take that step towards, yeah, we want to actually make this real and live. And then finally, let's not then stop at that point and think job done. At that point, we then need to really keep an eye on it, because it's that next phase, that adoption phase, that we're going to find, is this actually giving us our value? We can then get that measurable success and use that as momentum to deploy further if we're finding that it's valuable.
Yeah, and the key point here, this foundation is only it only needs to be as big as the use case that we're working on. So this isn't like, we're working with organizations now who have built Gen AI capabilities in their Salesforce org, and it's deployed.
Yeah.
So there are people are doing it now. That example isn't in public sector for I guess for context. But yeah, this is a lot of work on paper, but really, starting in a small area. And this isn't a case of, okay, Mr. Organization, go away and work for the next year and a half on your data foundation. It's not that. It's just working on where is that initial use case that we can look at. Obviously, build the right foundation for that use case. If we are to move into a production-based solution, and then go from there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It really, even though these are things you would want to do every single time, the amount of time needed to run through them, you could do this for like you say, for a well-defined use case, you could get through most of this, I'd say, in 4 to 8 weeks, perhaps all of it in 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what you're rolling out, because it is that quick because of how turnkey some of these solutions are inside of Salesforce. If we know the right users and we know the data's all safe and we've got all these, turn it on. It's ready to rock and roll. And then we watch it, we tweak it, we then roll it out to more and more users as we go. Very, very briefly, because I know we're coming up to the end, and I do want to leave time for if there are any Q&A coming in, but it wouldn't be a talk with Lightfold and CloudWorks involved if we didn't talk about Tesseract a little bit. Tesseract, it's not just a cool word from Marvel for a plot device. It is actually the name of a human-centered design method that we've been working on for, well, our director of product and design, Kylie Willett, has been working on Tesseract for probably longer than she'd like me to say. So it's effectively human-centered design, which is a well-known, well-quantified, well-understood way of designing, but it's human-centered design that has been tweaked and hammered into shape for data, AI, and analytics. So critically, there's a whole bunch of different modules that we use when we're running Tesseract with our customers. But just to give you an idea here of one that's incredibly valuable in government is when you are looking at AI use cases, these are our 5 big steps that we have inside the half dozen or so modules that we have focused on generative AI. We want to look through crystal ball. If we could predict anything ever, what would we want? Then viable. What if that is actually, something that we could do with our current tech? Ethical, really critical moment. Yes, we want to try and predict which of our citizens might enter financial distress or might need additional support services. We have to be really careful how we're predicting that, because if somebody was to ever ask, why did you reach out to me for this service? I do need it, or I don't need it, but why did you reach out to me? We need to know the exact answer. And we need to know that it was ethically sourced and not based on perhaps erroneous stereotypes or something along these lines. Valuable. Okay, cool. We like it. We can do it, or we think it's viable at least. It's ethical. It's going to provide value. Is it even feasible? Do we have the data for this thing right now? We run that through very, very rapidly across a whole bunch of different use cases. And that's how we can help you come to those points of safely rolling out generative AI use cases. Last thing here, I'll leave this on screen just for a moment, but this is how we would help get started. An AI readiness check, a rapid one where we just come in and we begin helping you out with it. 2 to 4 weeks. It's something that can be done for around about $20,000 and leaves you with a bunch of material that'll give you a really clear view as to whether you're ready to look further into it or what areas might need additional investigation to be ready. From there, if you were interested in proceeding further and you were looking for a partner, we can do an AI strategy piece with you where we go into exactly how you would implement and where you would go. And then, of course, if you needed help with the POC or the implementation, that's, of course, something we'd love to help with as well. That's taken us just about an hour, which means I've left no time for Q&A. Hooray! But if there is anything, please let me know.
Yeah, there's one question here. So just give me one sec. What kind of skills do we need internally as a government agency to roll out Salesforce AI?
That's a good question. At a really basic level, if you've got a team that is already administering your Salesforce environment, so you've got a Salesforce admin and maybe a few people supporting them in specific job roles, in terms of rolling it out and like making it real, that's probably all you need. These functions don't often need a huge amount of technical support in the back end. Um, in terms of then maintaining it and using it over time, you likely would want some people who are at least positioned as data champions, data custodians. They're the people who are going to be ensuring that your prompt library, remember those prompts are things you feed to Gen AI to get responses back, that your prompt library is growing in a good way, is getting self-pruned as things are shown to be more effective or less effective. In terms of some of the more complicated rollouts, there you might need a Salesforce developer. If you've got one already on the team, then you're ready to rock and roll. Otherwise, you might need support from an implementation partner. But really, the vast majority of the work that is done is actually not technical. There is some technical, and where it is technical, it's sometimes very technical. But the vast majority of the work is actually human. It's finding the knowledge that's going to feed your AI. It's finding the use cases where AI is going to be safely and valuably deployed. It's talking to your people and getting them educated on how to use the AI to best do their job and then manage it over time. It's quite interesting because the core consulting skills of understanding people, jobs, and what data they have access to, that's at the heart of generative AI, which is good news for us because it's something that we do very, very well.
Great.
We might leave it there then, unless
Yep.
there's anything immediate on the scale there, David.
I think we're good. So yeah, no, thank you obviously for everyone for joining. Really appreciate everyone's time. We'll send the recording out for this and also for the other sessions that I mentioned. But yeah, thanks for joining and hopefully you have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.